than that. Spitting opinions rooted in facts. Hope you aware the culture is bigger than plats. Used to be a summit, now we got a podcast. Give you something you ain't know you wanted. Black American podcast, Black American podcast. You might hear something.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Hi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I guess we're in the show and everyone can see and hear us. That's what it's telling me. All right, so welcome everyone to the 4 p.m. talk in Black America Summit. My name is Tania Peters, and I am the moderator for this span of time that we are together. And so the panel for this slot is experiences of educators in the classroom. So in this pandemic time, education has certainly changed. And so it's been definitely focused on the student experience. And so we're going to take some time in this hour just to get an understanding of educators' experiences in the classroom through this pandemic. And we're still in it, of course. So, and we're starting school. Some people have started back to school, and some people are going back in. I myself am an educator. I teach middle school social studies. So I will be going back in on the 27th. I will be appearing for pre-service training, and school starts September 8th for me. And so we're all in this stage where we are entering back in the classroom. They're trying to figure out what to do, even as we have in Georgia, some other places, students going back out to their homes, and it's transitioning. But what is the experience of educators? It's not always talked about, or when they talk about educators, it's in the form of they need to go in the classroom, teachers need to do this, teachers need to do that, but like, what are teachers going through? So that being said, on our panel we have Terrance Lewis, who is a Presidential Research Fellow and graduate student at Auburn University, and completing his PhD in secondary education social science. We have Peggy Barmore, who is an independent journalist with the Hechinger report. And she is here today because she has been writing about the experiences of educators. So she has a wealth of knowledge from the source. And then we also have, last but not least, Jakil Hill-Turner, who is a teacher in Chicago public schools. And I'm really excited to have her because Chicago is one of those places that, definitely was in the national spotlight before the pandemic. And then she can certainly lend a voice to what has been happening from her perspective in Chicago public schools now. And the experience she's had throughout the pandemic. So without further ado, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourselves more fully and to explain your role, and then just talk a little bit about, talk briefly, we'll talk more later about your experience as an educator in the pandemic or journalist in the pandemic. Mr. Lewis, you want to start?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you so much to Tania Peters for the panel. Thanks for the opportunity to share my experience.
If I may interrupt just for a moment, you're echoing. So I don't know if your sound is echoing.
There is a window. I need to close things, maybe. Let's see if that works. Well, are you speaking about my house?
There's like a scratchy echo going on. You sound sounds like it's like there's feedback. What'd you say?
Do I need to move to a different place in my house?
I don't know. Are you open? Sometimes it happens when you have two you're open in two different places and there's an echo, something echoing.
I just closed all my YouTube windows or other windows tabs.
Well, we'll try the best we can. Go on.
I'm sorry about that. But I am Terrance. I am currently a principal research fellow and graduate assistant at Auburn University. However, I do have a K teaching and actually Barmore. Actually documenting my experiences teaching in the pandemic district of I am a former middle school teacher. I taught social studies in Columbus, Georgia, and I am extremely happy and excited to be a part of the panel today.
Thank you. Miss Hill Turner.
So I am a fifth grade math and, traditionally a fifth grade math and science teacher. That did change a bit temporarily due to the pandemic. I ended up being self-contained, which is a new experience for me. But in general, I consider myself a social justice oriented teacher. I believe that my role in the classroom is to create or cultivate a learning environment in which my students can see themselves, can question what's going on in the world, can prepare themselves for the next phase of wherever they're going, and to be able to affect change at the personal level, at the classroom level. And so pretty much everything that I do is push through that lens or working toward that mission, including in my mentor work with newer teachers who oftentimes are not from the same cultural background as students that they're serving in Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Ms. Barmore?
Well, I'm not an educator. I am an education journalist, and I'm an independent education journalist, and I only write for the Hechinger Report, which is located or housed out of Teachers College at Columbia University. It's my job to talk to people like Terrance and like Ms. Turner to find out what's happening in the classrooms and to translate or to put those experiences into context and to actually share them with the public and to see if there are trends that are developing locally or nationally, or what other schools or families can learn from the experiences that they have in the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna go and ask this question. So what do you think is we should expect of educators during this pandemic time? What do you think we should be expecting from them? We expect a lot for them. What do you think we should be expecting from them?
I think that we should be expecting educators to be fully human. I think right now, families are kind of moving away from the place that we found ourselves in, because I'm a parent as well. So moving away from the place we found ourselves in last year, where suddenly our children's educations had now come into our homes, and now we are playing much bigger roles in terms of helping them facilitate various parts. Or even if we had older children, we're getting an opportunity to hear some of the things that teachers are teaching, some of the things that teachers are working with in the classroom, some of those behaviors and other factors that come in from the home are now present on the screen with all of our children, and we're now present and we're actually able to observe them. And then there seems to be a moment last year in our country where there was deep appreciation for what we were doing. And it felt for the first time as if the tide was really going to turn in terms of how people look at us and what we do. And after a long, very tiring year of that, things have seemed to kind of go back in the other direction. And so what I'm hoping is that parents and other stakeholders expect us to be fully human, because we've been in this as well as educators, but also as parents. And that, really what all of us need right now is just to create space for everyone's humanity, our students, our teachers, our parents, everyone. But more so than anything, We are here because we love kids. We're here because we're passionate about what we're doing. But we are also all really trying to make it through a very difficult time together.
Absolutely. Mr. Lewis, let's see.
I would agree with that. Is there still an echo? I'm sorry.
No, there isn't. It's awesome. I was like, yes.
That was good. But yeah, I would agree with everything Ms. Turner said. But I would like to add that I think that we should also expect educators to make mistakes. I think sometimes there's this narrative and this notion and belief that educators are perfect, and we're not. And I think that it aligns directly with what Ms. Turner said regarding us being human. But with that, we're going to make mistakes, especially instructionally, with this new layer of Zoom teaching, as I would say it, or concurrent teaching, as a lot of districts would call it. It's difficult, and it's a lot. And it's something that many teachers had zero training on, and there are certainly districts that are trying to do a little bit more to prepare teachers for that option. But last year, teachers had no training regarding how to teach both in students who are in person and also those who are on Zoom. That's the model that the district took, or just teaching on Zoom. So just completely expect teachers to make mistakes as it relates to instruction, and maybe also responding to some of the other factors related to their children.
Ms. Barmore.
From my recent reporting and from my conversations or the feedback I get to articles from parents, is that they also expect educators to be accountable to them. They also expect to be given a voice in their children's education. They want a voice in the classroom. They want a voice in who's teaching their children, what their children are being taught. They also want, again, more access to teachers. I think Zoom has given teachers access into the child's home, and it's also let parents see what's going on inside of a classroom. And there are those parents who really want that connection. It's that student teacher or that student parent or family engagement that schools have been talking about for so long. Well, it's real now thanks to COVID, and parents want to take advantage of it. They want alternatives for their children. They want class education to take place outside the classroom. They want flexibility and scheduling and hours. It's really, COVID has opened up a real, I won't call it a Pandora's box, but it has created several opportunities for people to get involved in education. And those who've been on the sidelines, like community organizations and parent groups, really want to take advantage of it.
I agree. I agree with all that has been said here. I feel like that as myself as an educator too, I absolutely co-sign with the idea that it's given parents a lens into the classroom to say, oh, wow, okay. Well, I see what the teacher's doing now, or I see how the struggle that is happening because I'm on this end trying to support my child and whatnot. And so, I think the expectation, the relationship with some parents, because I've had the blessings to have parents from the same parents from one year to the next in this time period. And so I didn't have only a few new students come through. It was all the same families. And to say, I see it now. I see what you've been trying to tell us, or there's like, I don't know what to do. Like, we're all like, we don't know. But then also a thankfulness for that. I love the idea of like that. They need to understand we're fully human because, especially our students, they only see us in the classroom. So like, before pandemic, the phenomenon of like seeing your teacher at the store or somewhere and being like, what you doing here? So like you see them outside of school. Like you think, I would just tell them, we don't live at school. So wonderful. Let's go to the next question. What do you need as an educator, or what do you wish that you received from your school to successfully execute your role in your classroom?
I'm just jumping on all the questions.
Go ahead.
I wish two things. I wish we received better technology, which I know in the midst of this all happening, and I mean really like unfolding, right, day by day, we're realizing like, oh, we're here. I know it would be a heavy lift, but better technology and a loosening of some of those restrictions that districts like to put in place. And so like in Chicago, because it's the nation's third largest district, it's like from network to network, there are very strong, tight confines placed on what we should be doing, sometimes by the minute, which is kind of new to me in my career and feels a bit stifling. As I think, most educators would agree with that. However, I was surprised to see them trying to lift these expectations that they place in the classroom on a remote learning environment. It was not helpful. Trying to have people come in and observe the flow and the timing of a lesson when most of my babies were just loading, over and over and over again, was just strange, because I felt that there were things that were far more important than what the pacing guide said. Now, I just didn't even understand I don't understand why a pacing guide even really existed in that sense, like not the same one, So it was just like, if they could have given us more autonomy to be responsive toward our students in terms of what they needed, So let me look at the standards. Let me do my own crosswalk, right, to 6th grade, so I can figure out like where are my heavy hitters, because we're not going to be able to do them all. Which is not, so what's most important? What needs are most important? What time do I need to build in for social emotional learning? Those types of things. I would have liked that more.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I certainly agree with the resources and better technology. But I think the R&B hit group escapes it perfectly. We need understanding, and that's something that educators don't really receive on many levels, and that can be from students, that can be from parents, that can be from central office, school board, and it's multifaceted. I think we need understanding to regarding that. Knowing that we don't have all the answers and that we're not perfect. We understand and knowing that we don't have all the resources that we need in order to get the results that the district, that the principals, that the school board, that the parents would desire. And so we need that understanding in order to I guess, to highlight the things that we don't have that we really need. And that's something that I felt like I didn't get on many levels when I was a classroom teacher, especially as it relates to people from the central office and from some parents.
Ms. Barmore, what have you learned from educators?
Well, I learned from talking to Mr. Lewis, in part that, and a couple of others. So the article I recently did on Black racial battle fatigue in Black teachers, and it's that I asked each educator I spoke with, did your teacher ed program or teacher prep program prepare you for what you're dealing with now? And 201, and I think Mr. Lewis, you'll agree, they said no. And it is unprecedented. We are in unprecedented times, but teacher prep programs now know where we're headed. They may not have known where we were headed a few years ago, but they know where we are now. And they have to figure out a way of short circuiting or reducing the time between when they can prepare, when they can identify what the needs of the current classroom are and predict the future, and then get teachers on board, those who are in the pipeline now, sooner. So it's usually a lag time of a couple of years between what a district or a locality tells their local teacher prep programs they need in their teachers, and it gets trained and those teachers end up in the classroom. And by then, you're 4 or 5 years down the road and it's too late.
Yes.
I got that right, Ms. Turner?
Yes.
You did. I'm over here going,
I would say in my district, they gave us they started to create slide decks. They had teachers who were who volunteered, were recruited to make slide decks of our units for our pacing and things of that sort. So we started to like get slide decks already made that we could then put on Peer Deck and go either in the form that they gave us or tweak it to our students. And so that became extremely helpful where I was teaching, but still the idea that, you're going to get through all those things. It was still kind of like, this is a lot. This still is a lot in a virtual setting where students are getting acclimated to just being able to show up academically online and all the ways that they have to show up academically, to navigate Cami, to annotate, do everything online. And so I think like the idea of giving educators grace, and the sentiment that they were trying to create the face-to-face online. So yes, you're still getting evaluated. Even if they're taking away certain components of the evaluation, you're still getting evaluated. They're coming in and observing, and that's fine if they do that. But like the expectation of that, well, how come most of your kids' screens are off? As we think about the effects of having your screen and being on all day for kids, how that is to be like on all the time on the camera, and how draining mentally that can be, what anxiety that can cause and whatnot. So yeah, let's see. Love the honesty and openness. Thank you so much. So next question. What are your expectations of parents?
Yeah. So I expect parents to also embrace and acknowledge their humanity. This has just been a big thing for me. Early on during the pandemic, a lot of my parents were essential workers. And it was really difficult for them, a lot of them, to accept that they had to leave the home, and what limitations that was going to place on them in terms of their interactions with their children. Many of them were lashing out at me, and I've traditionally always had the best relationships with parents, even the parents that just don't like anyone. But they weren't, it was like they were trying to hold it all together and hold it all on their shoulders, as we often do as adults when children are involved. But just understanding, again, that this is a really difficult thing that we are all dealing with. And if we extend ourselves some grace, if we extend ourselves personal grace, it's like then we can put things more into perspective. And we can do that for other people. So, I've oftentimes just wanted my parents to level with me if they could. And if we could put out there, okay, what is the most that you can do right now? How much can you monitor your children? When can you monitor your children? What systems can we work together to put in place to help your children with what you can't if you're at the grocery store, right? Stocking all night because there's no toilet paper or whatever else. That really is my greatest expectation, because again, under these circumstances, none of us are really functioning the way we normally would. And I think that's important to acknowledge, but then it creates, once we can do that, then it opens the communication and my parents can see that I'm an ally.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I would expect my parents to become a coach just like me. And that can be either, head coach, assistant coach, me being the head coach as a teacher, them being the assistant coach, and knowing that our players are their children. And even though I might be perceived as the head coach, we can still have tough conversations regarding the academic achievement, the behavioral expectations of their children. And within that role, there's also a level of involvement there as well. Assistant coach needs to come to practice. Assistant coach needs to be involved in dissecting the data regarding the achievement, academic achievement or behavioral expectations or whatever. And there's an expectation for the head coach, me being the head coach as well. And there's also a level of accountability there when we're not seeing it. Okay, all right, you being assistant coach, I don't see you playing a very active role as I think you should regarding your child, and let's see what we can do, what type of interventions we can put in place to fix that. But I don't see how else it would work regarding parental involvement that benefits and helps students achieve academically at high levels.
Go ahead, Ms. Barmore. You have anything to add?
Well, I don't tend to have expectations of parents as far as being in the classroom, but as a journalist who covers these stories about what's happening in the classroom, that it's one thing to hear what frustrates parents when they write angry letters or comments when an article comes out, but they also have to be willing to talk with us if they want to really have their story told so that others can understand what their perspective is. It's not just enough to say you're angry or they should, do something one way or another without saying, well, talk to me. What is your experience? What can I share so that others can learn from your experiences, so that those who need to hear your message get to hear it. Most of them are reluctant to share, or they and if they don't want to talk to me directly other than through like an email or a text, then they can also write a letter to the editor, but a lot of them are unwilling. I know it takes time, and not many really are leaning towards that, but you can't expect to hear your side if parents aren't willing to share their side.
Yeah, I would add that the communication part is very important. And it becomes, because the expectation that the teacher would reach out and tell you what's going on, and then the idea that there's like, well, if I don't hear anything, everything must be good. And so it's like, well, yes and no, because it should always be a continued response between us, where it's like, you can send me that message through whatever communication platform we're using, Class Dojo or whatever it may be, to say, hey, checking in on how everything is going. Some parents have this level where they're like, hey, checking and seeing what's going on. I saw that they're working with the student on stuff and says, we've been working on this. We have a question. But then, so there are different levels. And then parents who, are essential workers, have health issues, or there was a number of dealing with COVID, in their families. And then the ability to not to be open and say to us, look, this is what's going on. So we're not around. Some parents could be like, we're going to a funeral. They're not going to be online today or tomorrow because that's what's going on. Or, to say this is what's been going on in our family. Like, we've had a succession of their parents where that was going on. And then after a while you go, well, where has this kid been? And why has it been so long? And then you check in, the parent goes, yeah, I just didn't tell you. I didn't get a chance to say anything. So like on both sides, keeping communication open, not having one-sided communication with us. And making sure the biggest thing was making sure your kid shows up online. Because if they show up in the Zoom, then you're handing the baton to me, but they need to be in the Zoom. And then, are they awake in the Zoom? A lot of, Jakil. So then you're texting on Dojo, your child's not responding to us. Can you check? And they go, oh, they were sleeping. Thanks for letting me know. Right. So that's what I asked of my parents. So that's what I was expecting, that, if you're able to respond, let's tag team your kid together. Partnership. Yeah. How has this impacted you mentally and physically over the last year? That's a big question.
So I'll be honest. This was hands down the most difficult thing I've ever experienced. Yes. So I had to put considerable focus on my mental health, because we were here in Chicago. We didn't go back into the classroom until mid to late March. Mm-hmm. Yes. And what was kind of also involved in that, we're teaching remotely, but then our union and our district was also kind of locking horns. So in addition to dealing with everything that came along with trying to teach my students remotely, my teammate quit, so I became self-contained for the first time ever. And so I had, all of fifth grade and dealing with the isolation, dealing with the increased needs of my students, and seeing some of the things that were happening with them, and the continuous, like it was a rolling threat of a teacher strike. Every 3 weeks, we weren't sure if we were going to strike, because it was kind of like there's a threshold that like we have to pass, and so we get there, and then CPS will budge on one thing the day before. That really took its toll. And by the end of the year, I was just numb. I was just trying to like make sure I go to work every day, and I was kind of like for the first time, like looking at the basics. Don't lose kids, get through the lessons, don't cry, don't cry, go home. That was like my routine. And physically, just trying to work in my house that wasn't prepared to work in that way, had its impact on my posture, my back. I definitely, gained some weight. We had a beast of a winter in Chicago, just to the point we couldn't even open our doors. So, through the winter, we were really in. Our kids were really in. But there just wasn't much escape, and so it was really difficult. Definitely had me considering asking for the first time whether or not I should continue doing this. Yeah.
I would agree with Miss Turner. It was definitely physically and emotionally taxing on me. I also had those posture issues going to my chiropractor, and I was like, "Look, I'm young. This." Like, he was like, "No, it's workstation. Just being confined to your desk all day, now not being able to move around because you don't want to spread COVID or potentially spread COVID." So that was problematic within itself, and then the emotional toll. Going on Facebook, going on Twitter, going on Instagram, and just seeing people die every single day. People that people that you might not know, but that some of your coworkers might have known. I had a family member to die from COVID during this particular time, so it was just draining. And I'll tell this brief little story just to put it in perspective. So, like you mentioned in the opening statement, I'm currently a presidential research fellow and graduate assistant at Auburn University. So I'm no longer in the classroom. I'm not beyond returning to the classroom, but at this current juncture, I'm no longer in the classroom, and my mood has increased drastically since I left the classroom. My weight is now back level since I left the classroom, and that's not to say that I hate my job, but I think that does go to show the amount of stress that I was under this past school year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was stories like Ms. Turner and Mr. Lewis have just told that got the Hechinger report to assign me to look at racial battle fatigue in Black educators. And I think, Terrance, you were the first one to mention it to one of the reporters in an interview for a different story. And they were looking for someone who was willing to tackle it. And I said, yeah, okay. Raise my hand slowly but surely. But it was very hard, even as a Black journalist, that to cover a story in which that really involves you, not as an educator, but racial battle fatigue, it is peculiar to Black people. White people cannot experience racial battle fatigue. It is about those daily, they explain micro and macro aggressions that Blacks deal with regardless of your profession, and how they can lead to depression, high blood pressure, cardiovascular illnesses, hair loss, you name it. There's a whole gamut of it. That racial battle fatigue is a real condition, and it has physiological and psychological effects. But for educators who have to deal with children on a daily basis, the question was, is it going to drive more Black teachers out of the classroom? Because that's a real concern that some have. And the answers then this story was kind of reported over April and May, and published in late May. It really showed that it was too early to tell what was happening, but Black male teachers have a tendency to have the highest quit rate, and experts weren't predicting that to go away anytime soon. And a recent report by the RAND Corporation said that they are starting to see more teachers when retirements came up in June, that they did start to see more teachers exiting the classrooms. But the open window for it was, okay, well, where are they going? And that's the big question. They're not leaving the profession, as Terrance said. He's not leaving education. He's moving to a different level. That's maybe I don't know, the silver lining to what's happening before us now is that there's a lot of stress. It's taking a toll on all of us. It takes a toll on Black teachers, which rolls down to children because they are in the day-to-day contact with children. But it also leaves an opportunity to kind of to address the concerns of all of us who are struggling with this time.
Yeah. I would say for me that it got to a point where I didn't want to hear anybody talking about self-care. Because that was the thing. Self-care, take care of yourself. And I was like, how can I take care of myself when you keep on piling on like we still face to face and then we're not in the pandemic and nothing's wrong, right? And you're getting on us with small stuff like having our camera on or not, if I'm like when we're in meetings. I mean, like if we're in meetings with just the teachers and the principal and like everybody needs to be on the camera. I've been on the camera all day. And if I want to take a moment to just be like, I'm here, but I'm not on camera because I want to just like, I don't want to be like this. I want to be like this. And, or I'm listening, but I want to go and get some to drink or whatever. I'm moving around, but I'm still listening to this conversation. I'm still here in this meeting. And to have, people, comment on what you're doing over there, like, things like that. And I think that was also like for administrators, it might've been, we don't have an administrative voice in here, but administrators are educators too. But I would say that administrators also had this burden of trying to manage manage people that you could not be in contact with either. Mm-hmm. And, when you're used to walking in classrooms and walking down hallways to see what's going on, now you have to, jump into Zooms and you have to police people. You have to do the same thing we're doing with our students. They have to do that with us. But yeah, the self-care issue, I just got kind of tired of hearing it after a while because like, do self-care bingo. I was like, I don't want to do bingo for self-care. I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to do your SEL piece with me, but that's another job to fill out your bingo sheet. Leave me alone. Fill out this bingo sheet. So I think like walking really helped me. I think like and then with my kids, I have 3 boys at each level, at each K-12 level. So I have a 4th grader. I had a 4th grade. No, he's going to be in 4th grade. I had a 3rd grader. I had a 6th grader, and I had a 9th grader. And so and they were all honor roll students. And I just had to be like, you know what? We may not be honor roll this year. And I have to be all right with it. I started to like stress about it. Like, I'm trying to hold it down in my classroom, trying to hold it down at home. And then this pandemic comes and it just changes everything up. And where did my honor roll students go? Where did they go? So just kind of like, we just got to get through this year. After a point, it's like, we just got to get through this year. Everybody's got to progress to the next level. Thankfully, it was like 9th grade, 6th grade. So you're at the beginning of those 2 grades. So I was like, there's time for them to recoup anything that they don't get. But that wasn't for everyone, in this situation, that was not the case. But for me, I was like, I'm not going to worry about this. But I was teaching 8th graders. So I know that parents were like, is my child going to? For the first time in a long time, we were talking about retaining kids. Because if you just don't show up online, like, what are we supposed to do if you don't show up at all? And so, like, the kids are dealing with it mentally, the parents are, but so are we. And yeah, you just had to be nice to yourself, be good to yourself. So I had to learn some of that in a different way in this pandemic.
But we shouldn't overlook that. It's not just the pandemic. It was the pandemic. It was, the shootings of, Ahmaud Arbery and
yes.
George. My brain just went blank on George's last.
Yes.
George Floyd, as well as the rise in white supremacy and what was happening in the White House. It was unprecedented event for the nation. And it carried into the classrooms, regardless of your race. But for Black teachers who had to explain Black Lives Matter and the police shootings, it put an extra level of pressure on him, because you're trying to process that as an adult, as a human being. And then then your colleagues, if that's what happened in higher ed, are coming to you and asking you to help explain it to them when you're not even quite sure how to explain it to yourself and to your loved ones. It took an emotional toll, and it continues, I think, to take an emotional toll on people, because it's an unprecedented threat. And every time we see something happen on TV, it's another reminder of, it feels like it's another attack on us. And it's not, no one else can feel that but us. And it's hard to explain to people what that is.
Yes, thank you for saying that. Absolutely. And bringing that up, because that also, like, on top of everything else, then we're seeing all this play out. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. And just specifically because I teach on the south side of Chicago, that was, I mean, to me, like if this whole thing were like a play and there were 4 characters, that was the 4th character. It was just that present of a factor, specifically because of our city's history, recent history and long-running history with police mistrust in the public. We're already always on the verge here. And there were so many things that were happening politically, particularly with the election of our mayor, who was the president of the police board when Laquan McDonald was shot. There was distrust there. And so when this happened, the city just kind of went up. And what we were experiencing, what I was looking at on TV, felt so much less intense than what we were seeing here, just mostly because the city was we were already, again, so locked down. Our restrictions were amongst, the most extreme, us, New York, California already with COVID, but then them raising the bridges, ordering trains to only move outside, like move outward from the city. And because our city is so segregated from neighborhood to neighborhood, my students, who live in one of the worst food deserts in the city, did not have access to food for months. When those stores got boarded up, that was the end. And so then we were dealing with that. Teachers going to get diapers and formula and different things from different parts of the city to bring them into our families. And then people didn't understand why that was an immediate response. But, when you teach on the South Side, you're teaching Black kids. When you teach on the West Side, you're teaching students of either Latinx, pretty much, so it's like understanding that teachers, we got what we had, we understood what we had to do, and we understood the concerns of our students were very different from the concerns of students on the North Side, and the concerns of students and parents on the North Side pretty much drive policy in our district, regardless of how differently students are living in those areas. And so my students having to walk past National Guard tanks on Main Street, that stuff filtered its way into the classroom. I had to do the same thing. So, I mean, it was too much, it really was. And again, them dealing with all this, and their parents are very much so absent because they're pulling double shifts in the grocery store, different things like that. Heartbreaking.
Yeah. Students who, especially then, even let's talk about January 6th when that happened, right? And then kids are like, I have middle school students, so they're like, what is going on? The perfect teachable opportunity, right? As a social studies teacher, brilliant moment to teach, right? But then also they're just like, that could not go well with us, right? Coming off of all the of George Floyd and everything else, they're like, yeah, we couldn't do that. And just the amount of knowledge they had, understanding about it, to be like, yeah, America, I don't know about y'all right now. And then, yeah, it's just a lot. I'm there with you on that. I will say this to those who are watching, that please drop any questions you have in in the chat. We will be answering questions from there. But I also, and in the meantime, I'm going to ask one last question for you. So before we open it up. So speaking of training, preparation, because we were not prepared and we had to just kind of jump in and learn as we were going along. People thought that, we're going to give you a week of just crash training on the ins and outs of Google Classroom, Pear Deck, and Nearpod and everything else, right? And but the training, let's talk about the training you received and like what moving forward as we go into a new school year, like what more training do you think that you might need to sustain? Because again, we could see ourselves in the classroom and then out again. So the question is, can you speak to the training you've received as educators and what do you need now moving forward?
So we're a G Suite district, so they regularly train in the Google applications here. Of course, they did not previously train in Google Meets, right? Like it wasn't as in-depth as what we needed. At the school level, I surprisingly did all the training. So I provided the training. I'm just a very techie person in general. And typically, if something new is on the pipeline, I've already just kind of checked it out and tinkered with it myself. So usually my principal will give me access to this and say, so you see what you think about it, we'll talk about it. We'll see if we'll, implement it. And so as a result of that, I was doing the training for people and kind of mentoring teachers who felt like they needed a complete lift of their old paradigm. I think what I need more so than training is just really access to the resources that most teachers are being trained on. So we didn't have a Pear Deck subscription, we didn't have access to a lot of those things. And so you had teachers trying to write grants or trying to, fund it in their through their family members, which is just ridiculous considering how important these things are. So what I need going forward is, again, access to high quality tools that will allow us to make this more engaging, but also really get the information that we need from our students. So again, a Pear Deck makes a difference if students can work a problem out using their fingers so that I can see all of their thinking, or provide, attach a video clip to it. That makes a difference, because then it feels like I'm at a small group table, right? So it's well, not only do I understand that the student can do the skill, but I understand their thinking, I understand their approach, or I understand maybe that one piece where that misconception lies that we can then clear up. But I need access to the services that would provide that for us.
Yeah, and just given the amount of time, I'll say regarding the training that we received here in Columbus, Georgia, while it was existent, it was really insufficient. So it really didn't do a lot in terms of preparing me for what I dealt with this past year. But if I had to suggest or say or kind of advocate for a training that I think teachers need, especially in the South, it's going to be a training regarding culturally diverse students. We need more training regarding teaching people who don't look like us how to teach students who look like us. And it's a dire need, and I see it every single day. So that's one that I definitely advocate and suggest.
Yes, because the workforce for educators, is actually white women. They're the majority. And so, whether you are an educator, a white woman educator who is grounded in cultural, relevant teaching, the other CRT, and or you or you are abolitionist teacher, or if you're just trying to, you could be that kind of teacher but still need work. You could be the other teacher who's I'm just teaching the standards and I'm teaching from this book and it's not in the book and the standards, I'm not doing it, kind of thing. But yes, teach people that don't look like you, and teach people that don't come. And even for as myself as a Black educator, I teach people that look like me, but we don't all have the same experience, and so being able to speak to the experience of your students, which takes getting to know your students and knowing your families. Absolutely. Did you want to add anything, Ms. Barmore?
Just kind of a little bit of a repeat of what I said at the outset. I talk to different levels of the education system, and it's interesting for me to listen to the classroom teachers speak when you talk, because when you talk to the policymakers and the superintendent, they are not focused on the inside the classroom. They are looking at all these experimentals, changing the class day, the number of days in a week, where school takes place. Is school a building? Is it bricks and mortar, or can it take place, it can, and they are moving the classroom outside the school building. Those are things that Zoom, that COVID allowed to come in, and educators who have this, wish list of things they want to do, and with governments kind of loosening the reins during COVID so that they could keep kids plugged in, they are going all over the place and all over the map. And for me, it'll just be interesting to see how that vision up here actually works its way down to the classroom, and what preparation those teachers will get, and what warning or I don't want to call it indoctrination, but what introduction will parents get to the new school setting, and what is distance learning 2.0 too. It's coming back. It's not gone. Everyone thought it was gone with the vaccine, and now we're seeing, no, it's not. And what does that look like for teachers and for parents and for educators in general?
And I'm so glad you brought that up. I have a MED in educational leadership and policy. And so absolutely at the policy level, it's bigger picture, it's funding, it's, class size, what makes a difference in class size, longitudinal studies, and all this kind of stuff. And we're not talking about what happens at the as much at the school level when you think about policy, because it's more globally, and holistic. So and we've got all this money coming down from we got this money that's coming down from the federal government as far as the pandemic. And then in Maryland, there was a whole commission that was done before the pandemic about like the school system and what was needed. So we're trying it out in the stage where they're going to start implementing the findings of the commission report. So the Kerner Commission, that report and what it found, and we have this whole blueprint for Maryland that's coming down. And so there's that happening, the things that were already in motion, plus the new, and what does that look like? And the idea of that, how can we be innovative instead of reactive? Because you think about all the things that we did during the pandemic. Why weren't we doing those before? Why weren't we? They were all there before. What they did was they said, once we started to use them in mass, then they realized, oh, there's some things we need to tweak about this and make this better for teachers. Like the idea that Google Classroom did not have a way for you to do text editing in your, and I sent a message like, Google, we need a text editor. And then I got a message one day in my email box like, thank you so much for that. We now have a text editor. And I was like, oh, snap. I feel like I did something. I mean, I'm sure other people were asking for it all the time, but once they did change it, they let those people who had asked for it know. We now have a way for you to edit text. Like, can I bold something? Can I italicize something? Can I underline it? So now someone in the chat asked you, Peggy, is there anything that you discovered in your report that shocked you?
Ooh, shocked me. Well, it depends on which report. What shocked me and stayed with me, it didn't really shock me, but there was a sociologist, and she didn't make it into any of the articles, but she pointed out, because she covers children and natural disasters, and earthquakes, fires, tornadoes. COVID has been declared a natural disaster, for its impact on children. And she said she and her colleagues will be covering this for decades to come, the impact of COVID-19 on children. And that means that educators of all from pre-K through post-grad will be looking at the impacts of COVID for children, on children for, like I said, could be generations. And that was probably one of the most surprising. I hadn't really thought about the long range implication you kind of think it will go through, but this will be something that will be long lasting into our future, and the mental health implications of it as well across all spectrums and all socioeconomic levels. So
I hope this is a watershed moment for like how we do education, but I don't know. Education is not.
You'll have to come back and tell me so I can write about it.
Yeah. Like where can we trace back the way we started the shift that happened in the way that we educate? Because like we realized, at least for me, like, do we need to be in person for the amount of time that we are in order for students to learn? And if we have hybrid ways of learning, do they have to sit and be present on a screen for all 8 hours in order to actually learn something? And are there going to be ways for students to have different settings? If you need to be face-to-face, you get that. Like there needs to be the flexibility. It's not there now. If you only have seats for 1,000 kids out of a school district of 20,000 or whatever, to be able to get virtual learning, are you really meeting the needs of the students if they want it? You have a wait list, and so these are the kinds of things that I hope we don't become so rigid, like the whole idea of going back to normal,
And very quickly, the one thing that really did shock me when during this piece on racial battle fatigue, the story of Jasmine Lane, who was a new teacher who came out, and she had been in the classroom almost 18 months entirely through COVID, never met in person once with a person. She was hired with her administrator or a colleague. She was hired online. She resigned online, and she suffered only by talking to people online. There was no one-on-one human contact. And how do we make sure that in this changing environment that people do still get to see each other face to face, how important that really is, even for adults?
And I think that is so important, especially when, again, just looking at it through the lens of race. Oftentimes the schools that have the highest turnover are schools that serve Black and brown children, right? So we would need to look or think critically about what we can do to nurture new teachers and to retain new teachers in school environments that are already difficult to staff, right? And so what are we putting in place to make sure that should human face-to-face contact be absolutely out of the question? What can we do to facilitate or foster community and support so that you don't have repeats of that, because it's already sad enough or difficult enough to keep these school staff. And that's a concern that we're going to see, again, like in Chicago, we see much more on the South and West sides than we do the North.
So last words, as we come to the end, what are your last words on what you think people need to be keeping in mind as we think about the experiences of educators in the classroom as the pandemic continues?
Just continue to elevate humanity, the humanity of teachers, students, parents, all stakeholders. Let's just take care of ourselves.
Yeah, say the same thing. Stay informed, stay healthy, but most of all, try to display some of that grace and flexibility that you want to display to the educators that serve your children.
Mm-hmm.
Patience and perseverance. We have a long way to go, and we can't get there any other way.
Yeah, I would say be good to yourself. And know that, and prioritize what you can do and what you can control, and just doing the best you can with what you cannot control, like the serenity prayer, basically. Keep it close. Okay, it's been wonderful to talk to all of y'all. Look at that. It's 4:59, rolling into 5 o'clock almost. Thank you so much for your to the panelists for being here. Great discussion, and keep your heads up in this pandemic.
All right, likewise, y'all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Like, do you even know who you are?